Hello there, and welcome to another installment of Breaking It Down. You can probably tell where I am right now. Since the theme of this is recycling, I figured I'd take a look at my own little recycling can here to see what we got. Well, a lot of mixed stuff here. Some papers, cardboard, plastic, smorgasbord of items, and who knows what's recyclable and what's not. That's what we're here to talk about. Let's get down to it in the trash. We're using new materials every day. A lot of new materials are coming out almost on a weekly basis. And what happens is quite a bit of time and attention goes into making them. It's usually processed in a lab. There's usually a lot of detail involved. And almost equally important is looking into what happens to the material after it's used, right? Post-use, end of life. What happens after it goes in the trash or the recycling bin or the environment. And this is normally a pretty common occurrence. Except for plastic. Plastic started as this dream material, right? As I say dream, the sun goes in my eyes, dream material. It was cheap, it was durable, it was flexible, it was practical. Everything that you could possibly want out of a new material. And above all the shiny, bright properties of plastic was that it is recyclable. Now, when I say recyclable, is this a concept that was developed in a lab? Okay, was this developed in a classroom? Okay, was it developed in a marketing strategy session? After a little bit of careful digging, it was discovered that once the oil industry kind of got word that plastic might last forever and have a negative effect on the environment, they thought, let's come up with a way to sell it to people so that they'll still use it, but not feel as bad about it. Now, I'm not saying they lied, because technically you can recycle plastic. It's just not 100% accurate. It's kind of like me saying I could survive a punch from a boxer, professional boxer, Floyd Mayweather. Sure, I could. It'll hurt, but technically I could. Millions and millions of dollars went into promoting recycling, because promoting recycling meant promoting plastic, and selling people on recycling meant selling more plastic. Now, the truth is, plastic is difficult to recycle for 3 reasons. A, melting it and sorting it are costly, both time-wise and money-wise. 2, every single time you go to recycle it, it degrades a little bit. And trace, new plastics are cheaper. The plastic industry ended up spending money on making these commercials showing how special plastic is and how recyclable it is afterwards. But honestly, I wonder how much plastic has been recycled since it was created. Show it on the screen. It's really not that big of a surprise. I mean, to this day, there's so many different types of plastics, and separating them from one another is really tough, and you can't melt them together. So it's just this huge nightmare collection of all these different plastics that make it even harder to recycle. Now, some smaller recycling companies actually try to keep up with this by honing in on just a couple different types of plastics, like maybe cups and straws. But then something happened. A symbol appeared on all of these objects, which just made everything that much more confusing. What was that symbol? Ding! Basically, this symbol was manipulated by the plastic lobbyists to make it seem like wherever that symbol was, that item was recyclable. Is this true? Kinda yes, mostly no. The reason why the lobbyists and the oil companies spent so much time and money on this is that plastic is very profitable. Every year it brings about $400 billion of money in. That's big money. Honestly, this is a very complicated and complex issue, so I wanted to reach out to an expert in the field. I spoke with Laura Leebrick, who is the Community and Governmental Affairs Manager for the Rogue Waste family of companies in Southern Oregon, and she knows recycling, my friends. One of the first things that we spoke about was this kind of lack of connection between knowledge of what happens when things leave your house and the things themselves, right? So when you flush a toilet in your house, or when you put your trash in the bin or the recycling bin, as we saw earlier, where does that go? What happens to it? That's what we want to get to the bottom of.
We see that all the time in terms of a lack of understanding as to what happens once people throw things in a recycle bin, once people throw things in their yard debris cart or their garbage can.
We also touched on how the concept of throwing something away is a place that doesn't really exist.
One of the messages we always try to impart to people of all ages, not just kids, is there is no away. Let me explain to you sort of what happens once you do what you think is your part responsibly to properly dispose of something. Here's what happens if you put it through this pathway. Here's what happens if you put it through this pathway. I think there's definitely a lack of understanding.
So why is that? Why is there a lack of understanding of what happens when your waste and recycling leaves your house?
We don't necessarily educate people about what happens with waste of all kinds, whether it's our own biological waste or waste that we generate. We kind of have hidden that. I don't mean it in any kind of nefarious way, but we've kept it behind a curtain. So I think there's some shared responsibility in straightening that out.
Just as we mentioned before, that recycling emblem really ends up doing more harm than good.
So they see that recycle symbol, the chasing arrows, and they instantly think, okay, this is recyclable. So I do think we need to change that. I think there needs to be some sort of effort around truth and labeling on all kinds of packaging. I think there's an opportunity right now to kind of straighten out a lot of the public confusion about plastics and what it means to use plastic products and other kinds of products thoughtfully, and then make the right decision at the point where you need to where you're done and ready to discard them.
And earlier, do you remember how I said this was a complicated issue? Well, in some cases, it actually makes more sense for plastics to go to a landfill instead of them getting recycled.
I'll just use an example here of flexible packaging for certain kinds of products. Because of the savings in other environmental outcome areas, it's actually best to landfill that material rather than attempt to recycle it.
Just like with most obstacles, when something like this comes up and there's, for example, a need for better communication, that presents an opportunity for the waste management system and the public to connect and figure out exactly where there might be areas of a lack of understanding and how they could possibly develop that further to give people a better understanding of how the waste management system works.
It's been an opportunity to have some tough, but very honest and frankly, very constructive conversations with the public about what is and is not recyclable, and frankly, what recycling actually is.
Despite the fact that there are some obstacles when it comes to recycling plastic, there's still quite a bit to be excited about in terms of the future of recycling plastics and even the future of just dealing with plastics by themselves. Laura remembers fondly an experience she had while on a tour.
And we were giving a tour to a group of environmental science class students. And one of them said, this was a few years ago, I read the coolest article about how there's some kind of a fungus that eats plastic. Do you guys know anything about that? And how would you apply that in your landfill technology? And I was like, yes, exactly. I mean, there are possibilities, a host of possibilities we can't even dream of yet that are going to help us manage the waste that we create much more beneficially in the future.
One of the recommendations straight from Laura, when things are better maybe around us and COVID has distanced itself a little bit, go out and get a tour. See what it's like. Get right there on the front lines of the waste management. Dive in there and see what's going on.
I would encourage anybody who sees this, anybody that you talk to, encourage them to reach out and, if possible, get a tour, get familiarized with their local solid waste management system, because people are fascinated. And I have to believe that once people's eyes are opened, they think differently about waste. We include tours of wastewater treatment facilities in our tours. It's not just about recycling. We like to expose people to sort of what happens beyond the point where you think you're done with it, beyond the point where you put it down your sink, flush it down your toilet, put it in your garbage can, whatever. Let's show you what's beyond that. And people just love it. They just eat it up.
Ultimately, it does boil down to what our responsibilities are as consumers.
All of that is not to say that I don't continue to emphasize to people that they really do need to continue to be mindful of the waste that what we consume.
And there you have it. We just learned so much about recycling plastic. We learned that it wasn't really created in a lab as a end-of-life strategy. This was created from a marketing perspective to try to get people to care less about how much plastic they were using. And recycling plastic is really difficult because you have to sort it. And then every time you recycle it, it degrades a little bit more and more. And at the end of the day, newer virgin plastics are just cheaper. That being said, there is a lot to be excited about in terms of the future of recycling plastics, as well as the future of creating more sustainable polymers, which is something I'm going to be talking to you about very soon. And don't forget, just like what Laura said, when this pandemic gets a little bit more in control and it's over, head to your local waste management center. There is a bunch of awesome stuff being done there. I have been there myself. It is super cool. Get yourself a tour. And until next time, thanks for watching Breaking It Down. I want to thank you guys for watching the video. If you appreciate it, if you have suggestions, definitely leave us a comment, leave us a question. If you would like us to cover certain stories in the future, please email us at science@plasticoceans.org. Thanks for watching.